The logistics of the gray zone begins with the total dismantling of the civilian hallucination that borders are solid walls, when in reality they are merely selective filters designed to trap the stupid and the poor while allowing the sophisticated and the wealthy to pass through like neutrinos through lead. You must understand that the global supply chain is not a single unified system, but a tiered hierarchy of friction where the white market participants pay the maximum tax in both money and data for the privilege of safety, subjecting every packet and container to the panopticon of customs declarations, end-user certificates, and biometric surveillance, thereby creating a permanent digital paper trail that can be used to retroactively destroy them if the political winds shift. Gray zone logistics is the counter-protocol to this surveillance state, operating on the principle of plausible deniability and jurisdictional arbitrage, where you exploit the inconsistencies between two legal systems to move value from a place where it is abundant and unregulated to a place where it is scarce and restricted without ever technically breaking a law that can be enforced. This requires you to view the world not as a map of nations, but as a heat map of regulatory friction, identifying the nodes where the state apparatus is weak, corrupt, or simply overwhelmed by volume, and routing your assets through these pressure valves rather than trying to push them through the reinforced gates of the fortress. The gray courier does not sneak through the fence at night. He walks through the front door at noon wearing a suit, carrying documents that are technically correct but contextually misleading, relying on the boredom factor of the bureaucrat who is paid too little to investigate the nuance of a dual-use component or a misclassified asset. You must master the art of categorical camouflage, which is the practice of labeling high-value restricted goods as low-value unrestricted commodities, not by lying, but by altering the context of the object so that it fits a different tariff code. A cryptographic mining rig becomes a server heating unit, a tactical drone becomes agricultural survey equipment, and a weapon of information warfare becomes an educational tablet. This is not smuggling, this is semantic re-engineering. The supply chain must be decentralized into a mesh network of cutouts and drop points so that no single node knows the origin or the destination of the package, only the immediate next step in the relay, ensuring that if one node is compromised, the infection cannot travel up the chain to the architect. You act as a packet switcher in a physical internet, breaking large shipments down into micro-logistics, thousands of small, inconspicuous parcels that fly under the radar of automated flagging systems. Because while customs can seize a container, they cannot seize a swarm of 10,000 envelopes moving through the postal system of 3 different continents simultaneously. The gray zone is also temporal. It exploits the time lag between the enactment of a restriction and the update of the enforcement software, moving massive volume in the 0-day window before the system patches the loophole. You must build redundant bridges into your infrastructure, maintaining dormant channels that are never used until the primary channel is burned, ensuring that your flow of resources is anti-fragile, meaning that when the system attacks your supply line, you do not stop, you simply reroute to a path that is even harder to track. The ultimate goal of gray zone logistics is the teleportation of value, where the asset effectively disappears from the visible spectrum at point A and reappears at point B without leaving a continuous trail of metadata that forensic accountants can reconstruct. You are not moving goods, you are moving crystallized energy through a hostile medium. The friction of the border is the heat of the entry. If you come in too fast or too direct, you burn up. If you come in at the correct angle, using the atmosphere of the bureaucracy against itself, you glide. You must treat every physical object as a liability until it reaches the safe house, and every piece of paper as a potential confession. The white market relies on trust. The gray market relies on verification and compartmentalization. You do not trust the courier. You trust the leverage you have over the courier. You do not trust the route. You trust the redundancy of the route. The map is not the territory. The territory is a fluid, chaotic ocean of opportunities where the only crime is getting stuck in customs. Keep moving. Be formless. Be the ghost in the machine. The second phase of gray zone logistics is the ruthless exploitation of the human layer, where you must understand that every blockade, every firewall, and every checkpoint is ultimately manned by a biological entity that is susceptible to fatigue, boredom, greed, and social engineering, meaning that the most sophisticated security system in the world can be bypassed by a smiling man with a clipboard who looks like he belongs there. You must view the bureaucrat bureaucrat, not as an enemy, but as a malfunctioning gate mechanism that requires a specific access token to open, which is rarely money in the crude sense of a bribe, which is dangerous and leaves a trail, but rather the currency of compliance theater, where you overwhelm them with so much perfectly formatted but meaningless paperwork that they wave you through just to clear the pile from their desk. The gray operator weaponizes the apathy of the low-level functionary, understanding that the customs officer at 4 p.m. on a Friday does not want to inspect a container. He wants to go home. And if your manifest is clean, your labeling is boring, and your demeanor is submissive, you become the path of least resistance for his desire to clock out. You must construct a proxy army of unwitting or semi-witting actors who bear the kinetic risk of the transaction on your behalf, utilizing cutouts, intermediaries who know only the face of the person above and below them, but never the architect, ensuring that if a node is compromised, the interrogation yields nothing but a dead end. This is the cellular structure of logistics, where you treat people as fuses, designed to burn out to protect the circuit. The courier, the driver, and the warehouse manager are disposable assets who are paid a premium for their ignorance, not their loyalty. You must master the art of the drop, creating a disconnect between the digital ownership of the asset and physical possession, ensuring that you never touch the hot item until it has been cooled through a series of jurisdictional washes. This involves the use of mules, who are often unaware of the true value or nature of what they are carrying, shielded by the blind courier protocol, where the package is sealed and the narrative is plausible. It's just machine parts, it's just documents, effectively outsourcing the legal liability to someone who has no defense. You must also cultivate sleeper agents within legitimate infrastructure, a friendly clerk at the shipping center, a contact at the harbor, relationships built not on transaction but on social grooming over months, buying them coffee, asking about their kids, becoming a fixture in their reality, so that when you finally need a favor, it doesn't look like a conspiracy, it looks like a friend helping a friend. This is human hacking, exploiting the tribal instinct that makes it harder to search the bag of a person you like. In the gray zone, information is the only dangerous contraband. You must practice radical compartmentalization, where the left hand does not know what the right hand is holding, and even you, the architect, maintain a plausible deniability buffer, giving orders through encrypted channels or euphemisms that would not stand up in court. You are not a smuggler, you are a logistics consultant, connecting a buyer and a seller who happen to be in difficult jurisdictions. You manipulate the trust metrics of the system. High-trust societies are easier to exploit because they assume compliance, whereas low-trust societies require bribery as a standard operating procedure, or toll, which you must budget for as a cost of goods sold. You never display anxiety. The frequency of guilt triggers the predator instinct in the gatekeeper. You must project the aura of banality, becoming so boring, so standard, so utterly forgettable that the security apparatus's eyes slide right off you. You are the man in the gray suit, the generic van, the standard shipping box. You hide in the noise. You exploit the human desire to avoid conflict. You leverage the fact that no requires energy, while yes requires none. You make yes the easiest option for everyone in the chain. You do not break the lock, you become the key. The final operational phase of gray zone logistics is the terminal landing and the protocol of alchemical transmutation, where the asset must be successfully extracted from the shadow supply chain and reintegrated into the visible white market economy without triggering the immunological response of the state surveillance apparatus, which is most vigilant at the point of re-entry. You must understand that the last mile is the kill zone, because this is where the abstract trajectory of the shipment collides with the concrete reality of a physical address and a specific recipient, creating a permanent data point that forensic accountants can use to triangulate the entire network, so you never receive the asset directly at the center of your empire. Instead, you utilize a dead drop architecture or a cutout receiver who acts as a biological heat shield to absorb the radioactive attention of the delivery. The asset must undergo origin stripping, a rigorous sanitization process where every barcode, shipping label, metadata tag, and manufacturer serial number that could link the object back to its gray source is physically obliterated and replaced with domestic documentation that hallucinates a benign history of local acquisition. This is logistical laundering, where a shipment of restricted high-performance chips imported through a back channel is stripped of its foreign packaging and mixed with a legitimate inventory of broken e-waste, allowing you to generate a repair invoice that legally justifies the existence of the hardware as salvage parts rather than smuggled goods. You must master the paperwork shield, constructing a fortress of boring, perfectly filed, and technically accurate bureaucratic noise. Receipts from defunct companies, invoices for services rendered, bills of sale from cash auctions. That creates a chain of custody that looks impenetrable to a casual auditor but crumbles into dust if anyone actually tries to visit the addresses listed. The goal is to create a circular reference in the investigation where every query leads to another piece of paper rather than a person, exhausting the investigator's budget and patience until they close the file. You must employ jurisdictional air gapping, ensuring that the entity that physically holds the asset is legally distinct from the entity that profits from it, separated by a firewall of shell companies domiciled in states with high corporate privacy laws, so that if the warehouse is raided, the asset is seized but the architect remains untouched, protected by the corporate veil. The cooling period is non-negotiable. When an asset lands, it is hot and vibrating with the entropy of its journey, so it must be placed in quarantine, a storage unit paid for in cash, a basement of a proxy, a remote lot, where it sits dormant for a statistically significant period, the statute of limitations, or at least the audit cycle, to see if it attracts any delayed law enforcement tracers or GPS pings. Only after the asset has cooled do you integrate it into your active system. You must also practice digital incineration, the discipline of ruthlessly destroying the communication channels used to coordinate the move. The burner phones are smashed, the signal chats are set to disappearing messages, the hard drives are wiped with military-grade algorithms, and the digital ash is scattered so that no reconstruction of the conspiracy is possible. The grey profit derived from these assets must never touch your personal bank account directly. It must be filtered through a service layer, a consulting firm, a digital agency, a laundromat that charges the grey entity for management fees, converting the dirty profit of the logistics into the clean taxable income of a legitimate business. This is the transubstantiation of value, turning the lead of the underground into the gold of the overground. You must live by the rule of two books, one book for the taxman that shows a struggling but compliant business, and one book for yourself that shows the true dimensions of the empire. The ultimate victory in gray zone logistics is not just getting the package delivered, it is standing in the middle of a room filled with assets that technically do not exist, owned by companies that cannot be traced, generated by a supply chain that has already evaporated, and smiling at the auditor who can find nothing wrong because you have successfully simulated the boring, mundane reality of a law-abiding citizen while operating a sovereign state within their borders. The trail ends here. The asset is yours. The history is erased. The silence is total.